OMI is a collaborative institute that we broke off from Stanford about 4 years ago, and we're sort of an independent, neutral place for research. We've got lots of collaborators on the academic side and on the industry side and so forth. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about our approach and some of the projects that we've undertaken with various groups here. So Einstein's Principle of Insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result, and I think we've been doing that for quite some time in the clinical trials arena. And the cartoon here says we're ready to begin the next phase of keeping things exactly the way they are. So this is sort of the broken side of both the healthcare system as a service industry, but also on the research side. And I think personal genomics, personalized medicine is really one of the aspects that's unleashing us from this paradigm, but there are others, and social media growth is certainly one of those. So I think especially in this building, if you're in this building and haven't seen this curve before, I think you need to take another tour downstairs. This is Moore's Law, processor speeds increasing. We heard this morning about, sorry, I got my slides out of order a little bit here. So besides processor speeds increasing, we've seen, and I think probably everyone in this room has heard plenty about sort of the mobile expansion and penetration across the world globally. On the right side here, it probably doesn't project super well, but you can see that virtually every region of the world has almost 100% penetration except for Africa, and actually multiple areas have over 100%, meaning that there are more than one mobile subscription for every individual in that region. And that is heading in some areas rapidly to 200% penetration in the next 2 to 3 years by most estimates. So 6.4 billion subscriptions by the end of 2015. On the left side here, we have social media penetration, which tags along behind mobile, but you can see actually pretty heavy penetration, and this is actually active users, not total users. So the number of people who've tried something here is actually much greater. These are users who are on at least twice per week, and you can see in some regions, particularly in North America, we're exceeding 50% already, which is just phenomenal and represents a phenomenal new way to communicate with individuals on a whole new range of issues around health, but also around research. And then there's this explosion that's only just beginning, I think, around personal technology. Mike Snyder talked about it some this morning, and others have as well, where there's all kinds of different devices that we're now putting on people, or people are carrying with them, or we're putting into people's homes or their care venues, where we can collect enormous amounts of data. And it started off with simple things like tracking someone's activity with a band or a Fitbit, now to then to heart meters and so forth, and now to wearable watches, where there's several that will be coming out that we're already trialing, that will be monitoring up to 40 biometric parameters continuously. And this, to me, is part of the social and mobile landscape, where all of a sudden we're going to be awash in data from a functional side, not just from an omics side. So I'm sure someone will come up with a cute omic term for it, but I haven't come up with one yet. And you've heard this slide this morning from Ron Davis and George Church, and just now in the last session as well, about sequencing capacity going through the roof and cost coming down. This just adds to this tidal wave of information, and how do we use this for clinical trials. So I'm going to step into that. And really, our goal at OMI is trying to take all of those tools, which is really what we regard them as, and leverage them into a collaborative way into creating a health and disease revolution. So we've done this across different foundations, different academic collaborators, as well as industry and pharma, and on the pharma and diagnostic side. But really the key pieces to this are patients and their providers in terms of our approach. So Gil Oman talked about the 4 Ps of personalized medicine, and so I'm going to talk about the 4 Rs of research and clinical trials. And some of this really represents challenges, and I think actually the addition of social media comes directly at most of these, and I'll talk about that in a moment as well. So recruitment obviously is a big issue. 2 to 5% of cancer patients enroll in a clinical trial. That's minuscule considering the number of clinical trials out there for cancer therapies and considering the number that go unfilled. Over 2/3 of trials, not just in cancer, but over 2/3 of trials in general, fail to reach their target enrollment. Up to 50% of clinical trial sites enroll 0 or 1 patient in a trial. That's sad. We should be measuring every single patient every day, assuming, of course, they agree, but we as a profession should be taking note of every single interaction that we have with our patients to better their care. Retention is our second R. 80% of studies fail to finish on time because 85% of patients or studies fail to retain enough target patients in their study. Huge issues. Some phase 3 studies, actually many phase 3 studies have up to a 30% dropout rate. That's 30% of their cohort not completing a study. So missing data points galore, and that introduces all kinds of other issues. Relevance, consistently in the top 5 complaints from patients in or after studies is that this trial isn't relevant to me. Why does it matter if I finish this? Why does it matter if I enroll this? So this is a huge problem in communication and how we interact with those people. What does this trial do for me? And in some ways, we're asking the same question around personalized medicine. What does personalized medicine do to me, and what does it mean for my profile? Is this trial relevant to who I am? And reliability and replicability, of course, are tremendous issues, and I won't get too much into the quality across different clinical trial sites. So for recruitment, we've seen studies using social media get up to a 65% opt-in rate. That's up from that 2 to 5% in cancer. And I'll talk a little bit about a couple of examples where this happened, and one where we reduced our time of enrollment, our time of recruitment by 1/3. Retention, this is what app developers here in the Valley call stickiness or usability, and a lot of people are putting a sharp eye on this in terms of how do we make a trial interesting for a patient, not just scientifically valid, and how do we give something back, and that I think is a theory that I will come back to, and it actually comes back to us again in relevance in that if we give more back to patients, and we've heard various groups talk about giving data back, but it's more than just that. It's giving relevance and giving education back to those patients, and it's giving them a sense of trust as well. But also relevance is not just to the patient, but it obviously has to be to the disease and the product that's being tested. And reliability, of course, a lot of the mobile type of tools that we just talked about are hugely valuable in terms of quantification as we validate different instruments with different studies, and that's actually hugely underway right now in many different settings. So one of the things that we've been doing is really going around sort of the circle in healthcare and trying to find that give back, not just for patients, but for all kinds of different players around the group, around the wheel of healthcare. So we're working with payers directly, obviously researchers, both academic and industry, different physician and other service providers, as well as pharmacies, and labs. We use a tool called OpenMednet, which allows us to integrate various social media platforms, SMS texting two-way, obviously the web, mobile devices, and we actually have voice and phone interfaces. And we're doing back-end interfaces into EMRs, so we can get into Epic, we can get into push and pull of data. So the first study I was going to talk about is a collaboration with Alchemy, which is the Adair Lung Cancer Medical Institute, and the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute in USC, where we drove a remote consenting process and an online consenting process, as well as sample collection over those two institutions and a network of community sites, driving samples to academic labs for testing, as well as to Foundation Medicine, and then ultimately into the Genomics Young Lung Biobank at OMI. And all data was collected online. And the amazing thing, whoops, I don't know what happened to that slide. The amazing thing on this study was that we went from the blue line here that you see, sort of that slow snaking sinusoid, which is sort of the average enrollment and recruitment for most studies over many, many weeks. We actually moved that to a third of the time with a focused social campaign at the start of the study. So word got out very quickly, and we very quickly had, within 4 weeks, full enrollment in this study, and actually all of those patients went on to complete the study. Completely different study that we're in the midst of, actually we're in the third year of, again using a lot of different tools that some of which we just talked about, looking at a cohort of 800 patients for CDC across multiple sites, mainly in the US, but some outside the US as well. Patients coming from 9 countries. This is a 6-year study where we're looking at actually at chronic fatigue patients and characterizing both adults and kids, both with questionnaires and other metrics online, and tracking them through the years of the study, as well as functional measurements, but also biological measurements where we're actually getting RNA, DNA, saliva, and hormonal measurements and protein measurements for these different groups. And at the beginning of the study, we were told that this could never be done, but actually we, again with that study, got 100% enrollment and have continued with an over 85% retention, thanks to focus on the social media aspect and the stickiness aspects of what we were doing. So I'm going to shift gears right now in my last couple of minutes here, just talk about some projects that we're just launching. Really focusing a la Mike Snyder around large-scale measurements across lots of different populations, but doing this in a community setting where we're doing it across networks, just like the 2 studies I talked about, doing it across networks of community sites as well as academic sites, and some sites have more and less resources. So again, measurement of RNA profiles, of DNA sequencing, of metabolomics and microbiomics with our partners at UCSD and Larry Smarr's group. So one of these large-scale studies that we're launching is an autism family cohort. So we're looking at 10,000 patients with families, longitudinal 5 years, again, all kinds of biological sampling, but then all kinds of givebacks to the patients to keep them engaged. And that was one of the things we heard clearly from the community, but also tracking diet and other things, but really tracking outcomes in the long term. And this was told to us by both the scientists in the group, but also the families that this was going to be hugely valuable to them, being the patient and the family members, as well as providing a rich repository of work on the outcomes-based work. The second study is a larger study that we're launching with a coalition from DIA across industry, government, and patient advocacy groups, where we're looking to actually sample 100,000 women around pregnancy and medications that they are taking around pregnancy. So this is, again, a longitudinal study. We're going to be looking at outcomes over time of children, and doing a lot of online profiling, a lot of social connect pieces to that with physician involvement and opt-in possibilities for biospecimens. So these are 2 projects you'll probably be hearing a lot more about, but we welcome any level of collaborations, and I really think that the take-home here is that integration of all these wonderful technologies that we've been talking about is the key, and really utilizing them to drive the process forward. And I think we all have a lot to learn in that regard.